Lieutenant Sarah Chun stood at the back of the crowded briefing room, her hands clasped behind her back as she listened to the discussion about the upcoming joint military exercise. The room buzzed with conversation between officers from different branches, their voices mixing into a steady hum of military jargon and strategic planning. She kept her expression neutral, occasionally nodding when someone made eye contact, but mostly remaining invisible among the sea of uniforms. The exercise, codenamed Operation Thunderstrike, would involve Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Marine Force Recon, and Air Force Special Operations. It was designed to test interoperability between elite units in a complex hostage rescue scenario. The briefing had been going on for 2 hours, with various commanders outlining their unit's capabilities and roles in the operation. Sarah had arrived late, slipping in through the back door just as Colonel Martinez was explaining the timeline. She had been in the middle of routine paperwork when her commanding officer, Major Williams, had casually mentioned she should attend. Nothing urgent, he had said, just good to stay informed about joint operations. She had grabbed her cap and made her way across the base, assuming it would be another standard briefing that would put half the room to sleep. The woman sitting next to her, a Marine captain named Rodriguez, leaned over and whispered, "First time at one of these joint briefings?" Sarah nodded, keeping her voice low. "Yeah, my CO thought it would be educational." Captain Rodriguez smiled. "They usually are. Gets interesting when the egos start clashing between the different special ops units. Everyone thinks their team is the best." As if on cue, a Navy SEAL commander at the front of the room was explaining why his team should take point on the primary assault. His voice carried the confidence of someone who had never doubted his unit's superiority. "My boys have more experience in close-quarters combat than any other unit in this room. We've been doing this longer and doing it better." An Army Ranger major immediately stood up. "With all due respect, Commander, my Rangers have been conducting these types of operations since before your unit existed. We practically wrote the book on direct action missions." The Air Force Lieutenant Colonel chuckled from his seat. "Gentlemen, while you've been arguing about who's better at kicking down doors, my PJs have been saving lives in hostile territory. We bring a different skill set to the table." The Marine Colonel crossed his arms. "Force Recon has been handling reconnaissance and direct action for decades. We could do both better than any of you." Sarah watched the familiar dance of military pride with quiet amusement. She had seen this play out countless times before, though usually not in such a formal setting. Each branch genuinely believed they were the best, and in many ways, they were all right. Each unit had different strengths, different training, different missions. The key was knowing how to use those differences effectively. Major General Harrison, who had been quietly observing from the front of the room, finally stood up. The room immediately fell silent. Harrison was old-school military with 30 years of service and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. His gray hair was perfectly styled, his uniform immaculate, and his expression serious. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying easily through the room, "this exercise isn't about proving which unit is superior. It's about learning to work together effectively. The enemy doesn't care about our inter-service rivalries." He walked to the large screen at the front of the room, where a detailed map of the training facility was displayed. "The scenario is straightforward. Hostages are being held in a multi-story building complex. We have limited intelligence on the number of hostiles, their weapons, and the exact location of the hostages. Multiple entry points, various escape routes, and civilian bystanders in the area." The general pointed to different areas on the map. "Each unit will have a specific role. Navy SEALs will handle the water approach and secure the dock area. Army Rangers will establish a perimeter and handle crowd control. Marines will take the east entrance, and Air Force will provide overwatch and medical support." Commander Peterson, the SEAL officer, raised his hand. "General, what about the primary breach? Who's taking point on the main assault?" Harrison smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. "That's where it gets interesting. We're going to try something different for this exercise. Instead of having one of the traditional special operations units lead the assault, we're going to use someone with a different background." The room stirred with curiosity. Several officers exchanged glances, wondering what the general had in mind. Sarah continued to stand quietly at the back, assuming she would learn about this mystery unit along with everyone else. "We've arranged for a specialist to join the exercise," Harrison continued. "Someone with experience in high-stakes operations and a track record that speaks for itself. The question is whether our elite units can adapt to working with an unconventional leader." Major Thompson from the Rangers leaned forward. "What kind of specialists, sir? What unit are they from?" "That's classified for now," Harrison replied. "What I can tell you is that this individual has successfully completed operations that most people in this room have only read about in classified reports. The person has experience with solo infiltration, precision shooting, and high-value target elimination." The speculation in the room was almost audible. Officers whispered to each other, trying to guess which mysterious unit or which legendary operator would be joining their exercise. Some wondered if it might be someone from Delta Force or DevGru. Others speculated about CIA operatives or international specialists. Captain Rodriguez nudged Sarah. "Any idea who they're talking about? Your unit work with any special operators?" Sarah shrugged. "Could be anyone. Lots of classified units out there that most people never hear about." The briefing continued with tactical details, timing, and coordination procedures. Sarah found herself genuinely interested in the complexity of the operation. The scenario was well designed, with multiple variables and decision points that would test the unit's ability to adapt and communicate under pressure. As the formal presentation wound down, officers began breaking into smaller groups to discuss specific coordination details. Sarah was about to slip out of the room when Major Williams appeared beside her. "Chun, glad you made it," he said, his tone casual but his eyes serious. "Learn anything interesting?" "It's a complex operation, sir. Should be good training for everyone involved." Williams nodded. "Walk with me for a minute." They moved toward the exit, weaving between clusters of officers who were deep in conversation about tactics and procedures. Once they were in the hallway, Williams stopped and turned to face her. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you about this exercise." The use of her first name instead of her rank caught her attention. Major Williams was strictly professional during duty hours, always maintaining proper military protocol. The shift to informality suggested this was about to become a very different kind of conversation. The specialist General Harrison mentioned. Williams continued, keeping his voice low. "That's you." Sarah blinked, certain she had misheard. "Sir, you're going to be leading the primary assault team for Operation Thunderstrike." The words hit her like a physical blow. She looked around the hallway, making sure no one was within earshot. "Major, I think there's been some kind of mistake. I'm not special operations. I'm a logistics officer." Williams smiled, the same expression she had seen 100 times before, but now it carried a different meaning. "Sarah, we both know that's not entirely accurate." Her mind raced. Her official military record showed standard training, routine deployments, and administrative positions. She had been careful to maintain that cover for years. How did Williams know? "I don't understand what you're suggesting, sir." "The Pentagon has been tracking your real background for some time," Williams said quietly. "They know about the operations you've been involved in. They know about your actual training and experience. And they've decided it's time to put those skills to use in a different context." Sarah felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. Her carefully maintained secret was apparently not as secret as she had believed. The question was how much they knew and what they intended to do with that information. "Sir, I think there's been some kind of intelligence error. My record clearly shows." Williams held up a hand to stop her. "Sarah, I've seen your real file. Not the one that shows routine logistics work, but the one that details your actual activities over the past 8 years. The Pentagon wants to see how traditional special operations units react to working with someone of your particular background." The implications began to sink in. This wasn't just about a training exercise. This was about exposing her real identity to a room full of special operations officers who prided themselves on being the best of the best. They were about to learn that someone they had never heard of, someone with no apparent special operations credentials, would be leading them into a complex tactical situation. "Major, with respect, this seems like a recipe for disaster." Those units in there have trained together for years. They have established procedures and command structures. Dropping an unknown quantity into the mix is exactly what happens in real operations, Williams finished. The enemy doesn't always cooperate with our organizational charts and command structures. Sometimes the person best qualified to lead an operation isn't the person with the highest rank or the most obvious credentials. Sarah understood the logic, but she also understood the reality of military culture. The officers in that briefing room would not react well to being told that their units would be led by someone they perceived as a desk officer. The situation had the potential to become a complete disaster. "When do they find out?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning, just before the exercise begins. General Harrison wants to see their natural reactions when they discover who will be leading the operation." Sarah nodded slowly, her mind already working through the implications and potential complications. She had spent years maintaining her cover identity precisely to avoid this kind of situation. Now she was being forced into the spotlight whether she wanted it or not. "Is this optional, sir?" Williams shook his head. "This comes directly from the Pentagon. It's not a request." She understood. In the military, orders from the Pentagon were not suggestions. They were absolute directives that left no room for interpretation or refusal. "I'll need access to the complete tactical briefing materials," she said, accepting the inevitable. "And I'll need to review the personnel files for the units involved." "Everything will be in your quarters tonight," Williams assured her. "You'll have complete tactical authority over the operation. The unit commanders will receive those orders tomorrow morning along with the news about who they'll be working for." As they walked back toward the main corridor, Sarah's mind was already shifting gears. The comfortable anonymity she had maintained for years was about to end. Tomorrow, she would have to step out from behind her carefully constructed facade and prove that she deserved the respect of some of the most elite operators in the American military. The challenge wasn't just tactical. Managing the egos and expectations of seasoned special operations commanders would require a different kind of skill set. She would have to demonstrate her competence quickly and decisively before their skepticism turned into outright resistance. Back in the briefing room, the discussions continued. Officers exchanged contact information and made plans for preliminary coordination meetings. None of them suspected that the quiet logistics officer they had barely noticed would soon be giving them orders in what they assumed would be a straightforward training exercise. Sarah paused at the entrance to the briefing room, watching the animated conversations between the various unit commanders. Tomorrow, these confident, experienced officers would learn that their assumptions about military hierarchy and special operations culture were about to be challenged in ways they never anticipated. The real question wasn't whether she could successfully complete the tactical mission. She had handled far more complex operations with much higher stakes. The question was whether she could manage the political and psychological dynamics of working with units that prided themselves on being elite while maintaining their respect and cooperation. She took a deep breath and walked away from the briefing room, knowing that the next 24 hours would change everything about her military career. The era of anonymity and hidden competence was about to end, whether she was ready for it or not. The pre-dawn air was crisp as Sarah arrived at the Tactical Operations Center. She had spent the entire night reviewing personnel files, tactical plans, and intelligence reports. The materials Major Williams had promised were comprehensive, giving her detailed information about each unit's capabilities, recent training, and individual officer profiles. More importantly, she now had a complete understanding of the exercise scenario and the challenges they would face. The operations center buzzed with activity as support staff prepared equipment and communication systems. Sarah made her way to the central planning table, where detailed maps and satellite imagery were spread out under bright overhead lights. She had arrived 30 minutes before the scheduled briefing, wanting to review the tactical setup one final time before facing the unit commanders. Her official orders, signed by General Harrison himself, granted her complete operational authority over the exercise. The document was clear and unambiguous, leaving no room for interpretation or challenge. Every participating unit would report directly to her for the duration of the operation. At precisely 0600 hours, the unit commanders began arriving. Commander Peterson from the Navy SEALs entered first, followed by Major Thompson from the Rangers, Colonel Bradley from the Marines, and Lieutenant Colonel Martinez from the Air Force. Each officer carried himself with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command and respect. They gathered around the planning table, exchanging morning greetings and casual conversation about the upcoming exercise. Sarah remained standing at the far end of the table, reviewing her notes and letting them settle into their usual dynamic. She could feel their curious glances as they wondered when the mysterious specialist would arrive. General Harrison entered at exactly 0615, followed by Major Williams and several other senior officers who would be observing the exercise. The room immediately came to attention, with all officers snapping to rigid posture until Harrison told them to be at ease. "Gentlemen," Harrison began, his voice carrying the authority of decades in uniform. "Before we begin the tactical briefing, I need to introduce you to the person who will be leading this operation." The unit commanders looked around expectantly, their eyes scanning the room for someone they hadn't noticed before. Sarah could see the confusion beginning to form as they realized there were no unfamiliar faces present. Harrison continued, his expression serious. "Your operational commander for Exercise Thunderstrike will be Lieutenant Sarah Chun." The silence that followed was profound. Four elite special operations commanders stared at the woman they had dismissed as a minor administrative officer. Their expressions ranged from confusion to disbelief, with none of them quite able to process what they had just heard. Commander Peterson was the first to find his voice. "Sir, I think there might be some confusion. Lieutenant Chun is a logistics officer. That is her official designation," Harrison replied calmly. "However, her actual qualifications for this mission extend far beyond what appears in her standard personnel file." Major Thompson stepped forward, his tone respectful but firm. "General, with all due respect, my Rangers have trained for months for this type of operation. We know each other's capabilities, we've developed tactics specifically for this scenario, and we've rehearsed our procedures extensively. Bringing in someone unfamiliar with our methods will test your ability to adapt to real-world conditions," Harrison interrupted. "In actual operations, you don't always get to work with people you've trained with. Sometimes the person best qualified to lead a mission is someone you've never met before." Colonel Bradley crossed his arms. "Sir, what exactly are Lieutenant Chin's qualifications for leading a complex multi-unit special operations exercise?" Harrison looked directly at Sarah. "Lieutenant, would you care to brief these officers on your background?" Sarah stepped forward, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether she gained their respect or faced ongoing resistance throughout the exercise. She had been in similar situations before, but never with the stakes quite so high or with such a skeptical audience. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice calm and professional, "I understand your concerns, and they're completely valid. You don't know me, you haven't worked with me, and my official record doesn't suggest the kind of experience typically required for this type of mission." She moved to the tactical display, pointing to the building complex where the exercise would take place. "What I can tell you is that I've successfully completed 43 similar operations over the past 8 years. 31 of those were solo infiltrations into hostile territory. 12 involved coordinating with unfamiliar units under combat conditions." The room remained silent, but she could see the shift in their attention. The specific numbers and confident delivery had caught their interest, even if they remained skeptical. "My longest confirmed kill was at 1,847 meters using a modified Barrett M107A1 in Afghanistan," she continued matter-of-factly. "I've conducted successful extractions in 17 different countries, including 5 operations where I had to neutralize multiple targets while protecting civilian hostages." Commander Peterson leaned forward. "What unit were you with for these operations?" Sarah glanced at General Harrison, who nodded slightly. "That information remains classified. What I can tell you is that my operations were conducted under the authority of Joint Special Operations Command, with oversight from the Defense Intelligence Agency. The mention of JSOC and DIA created another stir among the commanders. These were the organizations that handled the most sensitive and dangerous military operations, often with operators whose identities and activities were kept secret even from other military units. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez spoke up. Why the cover identity? Why work as a logistics officer? Because the most effective operators are often the ones nobody suspects, Sarah replied. My official position allowed me to move freely around military installations, access information, and maintain contacts without drawing attention. It provided perfect cover for my actual activities. Major Thompson studied her with new interest. What kind of training background do we talking about? Sarah moved to another section of the tactical display, pointing to various entry points and defensive positions. Sniper training at Fort Benning, close quarters combat at the Special Operations Training Center, advanced demolitions at Eglin Air Force Base, and specialized interrogation resistance training at an undisclosed location. She turned back to face the commanders. I've completed the Marine Corps Infantry Officer Course, the Army Ranger School, Navy SEAL Hell Week, and Air Force Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape Training. Not because I was assigned to those programs, but because the mission required that level of preparation. The skepticism in the room was beginning to transform into curiosity and grudging respect. These were men who understood exactly how difficult each of those training programs was, and the idea that someone had completed all of them was impressive even if they remained doubtful about her claims. Colonel Bradley asked the question they were all thinking. Can you prove any of this? General Harrison intervened before Sarah could respond. Colonel, Lieutenant Chin's classified operations record has been reviewed and verified by the highest levels of the Pentagon. The details of her activities are not open for discussion. What matters for this exercise is whether she can effectively coordinate your units in a complex tactical situation. Sarah appreciated the general's intervention, but she also understood that respect had to be earned through demonstration, not through classified files that none of these officers would ever be allowed to see. Gentlemen, I know this situation is unusual, she said, looking each commander in the eye. You have every right to be skeptical, but I'm not asking you to take my word for anything. Over the next 6 hours, you'll see exactly what I'm capable of and whether I deserve your trust. She moved back to the tactical display, shifting into operational mode. Now, let's talk about how we're going to successfully complete this mission. For the next hour, Sarah outlined her tactical plan with a level of detail and sophistication that impressed even the skeptical commanders. She had identified vulnerabilities in the target building that none of them had noticed. Her timing sequences were precise and realistic. Her contingency plans covered scenarios they hadn't considered. More importantly, she demonstrated a deep understanding of each unit's capabilities and limitations. She assigned roles that played to each team's strengths while covering their weaknesses. Her plan required genuine cooperation between the units, with success depending on precise coordination and mutual trust. Commander Peterson found himself nodding as she explained the SEAL team's approach route. The plan took advantage of their water-based training while avoiding the building's strongest defensive positions. It was tactically sound and showed real understanding of SEAL capabilities. Major Thompson was similarly impressed with how she planned to use his Rangers. Instead of relegating them to simple perimeter security, she had them conducting a complex flanking maneuver that would require their advanced infantry training and unit cohesion. The Air Force and Marine assignments were equally thoughtful, utilizing each unit's specialized skills in ways that contributed meaningfully to the overall mission success. Sarah had clearly studied their training records and understood what each team could realistically accomplish. As the briefing concluded, the atmosphere in the room had changed significantly. The outright skepticism had been replaced by cautious interest and professional curiosity. These were experienced officers who recognized tactical competence when they saw it, regardless of their initial assumptions. General Harrison stood up, signaling the end of the formal briefing phase. Gentlemen, You have 2 hours to conduct final preparations with your units. The exercise begins at 1,000 hours. Lieutenant Shun will have operational command throughout the mission. The commanders began filing out, but Sarah noticed they were moving more slowly than usual, stealing glances at her and exchanging meaningful looks with each other. Their world had been turned upside down in the space of 90 minutes, and they were still processing the implications. Commander Peterson approached her as the room emptied. "Lieutenant, I have to ask, the sniper shot you mentioned, the 1,847-meter kill, what were the conditions?" Sarah looked at him steadily. "Variable crosswinds, temperature gradient, moving target, and I had approximately 30 seconds to acquire, calculate, and engage before the target reached cover." Peterson whistled softly. "That's world-class shooting." "It was a necessary shot," she replied simply. Major Thompson overheard the conversation and moved closer. "How many confirmed kills do you have?" Sarah hesitated, glancing toward General Harrison, who was still in the room. "That information is classified, Major. What I can tell you is that I've never missed a target when lives were on the line." The simple confidence in her voice was more convincing than any number would have been. Both officers nodded slowly, beginning to understand that they were dealing with someone whose experience went far beyond anything they had initially imagined. As the last of the commanders left the operations center, Sarah found herself alone with General Harrison and Major Williams. The general approached her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "How do you think that went?" he asked. Sarah considered the question carefully. "They're professional enough to follow orders and execute the mission. Whether they truly accept my authority will depend on how the operation unfolds. Talk is easy. Performance under pressure is what matters." Harrison smiled, this time with genuine warmth. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. You understand that this exercise is about more than just tactical training." She nodded. "You're evaluating whether unconventional command structures can work in special operations. Whether elite units can adapt to leadership they don't expect or immediately understand. The modern battlefield is changing," Harrison explained. "We can't always rely on traditional unit structures and familiar command relationships. Sometimes the person best qualified to lead a mission is someone who doesn't fit the expected profile." Sarah understood the broader implications. If the exercise succeeded, it could influence how special operations commands approach leadership selection and unit integration in future real-world missions. If it failed, it would reinforce existing biases about who was qualified to command elite units. The pressure was significant, but it wasn't unfamiliar. Every operation she had conducted over the past 8 years had carried high stakes and uncertain outcomes. The difference was that this time, her performance would be observed and evaluated by people who would draw conclusions about military policy and doctrine. 2 hours until kickoff, Major Williams observed. "Any final preparations?" Sarah looked at the tactical display one more time, mentally reviewing her plan and checking for any detail she might have overlooked. The operation was complex but manageable, assuming all units performed as expected and no major complications arose. "I want to visit each unit's preparation area," she said, "not to check on their readiness, but to make sure they understand their role in the larger plan and feel comfortable communicating with me during the operation." Harrison nodded approvingly. "Good instinct. The personal touch often makes the difference in these situations." As Sarah prepared to leave the operations center, she reflected on how much her life had changed in the past 24 hours. Yesterday, she had been an anonymous logistics officer attending a routine briefing. Today, she was about to lead some of the military's most elite units in a complex tactical exercise that would test everything she had learned over 8 years of classified operations. The irony wasn't lost on her. After years of maintaining perfect anonymity and avoiding attention, she was now in a position where success would inevitably draw more scrutiny and possibly lead to additional high-profile assignments. Her days of operating in the shadows were probably coming to an end, whether the exercise succeeded or failed. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, she had a mission to complete, and a reputation to establish. The skeptical commanders were about to discover whether the quiet logistics officer deserved their respect, and Sarah intended to make sure that question was answered definitively. The Navy SEAL team was conducting final equipment checks when Sarah approached their staging area. 12 operators in full tactical gear were methodically inspecting weapons, communications equipment, and specialized diving apparatus. Their movements were precise and economical, reflecting years of training and combat experience. Commander Peterson noticed her approach and called his team to attention. "Lieutenant Chun, the team is ready for your inspection." Sarah waved them back to their preparations. "I'm not here for an inspection, Commander. I want to make sure everyone understands the coordination requirements and feels comfortable with the communication protocols." Petty Officer Rodriguez, the team's senior enlisted man, looked up from his rifle. "Ma'am, we've been briefed on the tactical plan, but some of the guys have questions about the timing sequences." Sarah moved to their tactical board, where the team had mapped out their specific approach route and objectives. "What specifically concerns you?" Seaman Williams, one of the younger team members, spoke up hesitantly. "Ma'am, the plan calls for us to breach the dock area at exactly 1,047 hours, but that timing seems pretty tight considering the unknown variables." She studied their route diagram, noting the potential complications they had identified. "You're right to be concerned about that timing. The plan allows for a 3-minute window on either side of the target time. If you encounter unexpected resistance or obstacles, you have the authority to adjust your timeline and report the change." Commander Peterson moved closer to the board. "What if we're running significantly behind schedule? How does that affect the overall operation?" Sarah appreciated the question because it showed he was thinking about the broader mission rather than just his team's specific objectives. The beauty of this plan is that each team's success isn't dependent on split-second timing from the other units. We have built-in flexibility that allows for real-world complications. She pointed to different areas on their tactical diagram. "Your primary objective is to secure the dock area and prevent any escape attempts by water. Secondary objectives include establishing overwatch positions and providing backup communications. As long as you achieve the primary objective within the general time frame, the mission can succeed even if other elements face delays." Petty Officer Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "That makes sense. We've been in situations where rigid timing created more problems than it solved." "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "Real operations rarely go exactly according to plan. The key is having enough flexibility to adapt while maintaining overall mission integrity." She spent another 15 minutes with the SEAL team, answering detailed questions about their specific role and ensuring they understood how their actions would support the broader tactical picture. Their questions were intelligent and showed they had thoroughly studied the plan. More importantly, their tone had shifted from skeptical to professionally engaged. The Army Ranger staging area presented a different scene. 30 Rangers were organized into 3 squads, each with specific responsibilities for perimeter control and tactical support. Major Thompson was conducting a final briefing when Sarah arrived, his voice carrying clearly across the preparation area. "Remember, this isn't a standard direct assault," he was telling his troops. "We're providing precision support for a coordinated operation involving multiple units. Your discipline and fire control will be critical to mission success." Sarah waited until he finished before approaching. The Rangers continued their preparations, but she could feel their attention on her as she and Thompson moved to review their tactical assignments. "Major, how do your men feel about the unconventional command structure?" she asked directly. Thompson considered his answer carefully. "They're professional soldiers, Lieutenant. They'll follow orders and execute the mission regardless of personal opinions. But I won't lie to you. Some of them are wondering how someone with your background ended up in command of this operation." Sarah nodded, appreciating his honesty. What would it take to turn that skepticism into confidence? Honestly, proof that you understand infantry tactics and won't get them killed trying to execute an unrealistic plan. She gestured toward the tactical display they had set up. "Walk me through your biggest concerns about the plan." For the next 20 minutes, Thompson outlined several potential problem areas where his Rangers might face unexpected complications. Sarah listened carefully, asking clarifying questions and taking notes. When he finished, she pointed to specific elements of the tactical plan that addressed each concern he had raised. Your squads will have real-time communication with overwatch positions, she explained. If you encounter resistance that wasn't anticipated, you'll have immediate fire support from 3 different angles. The plan doesn't require you to fight your way through superior forces. It provides multiple options for tactical withdrawal and repositioning. Thompson studied the coordination details more carefully. I have to admit, the support structure is more comprehensive than I initially realized. Major, I've never lost a soldier under my command, Sarah said quietly. I don't intend to start today. Every element of this plan is designed to minimize risk while maximizing mission success. The conviction in her voice clearly impressed him. Thompson nodded slowly, his expression shifting from guarded skepticism to cautious respect. My Rangers will be ready, Lieutenant. The Marine Force Recon team was conducting tactical rehearsals when Sarah reached their staging area. Colonel Bradley had his Marines running through their assault sequence for what appeared to be the 10th time, with each iteration slightly faster and more precise than the last. Again, Bradley called out as his team completed another run-through. Faster on the breach, better communication on the room clearing. Sarah watched the rehearsal with professional interest. The Marines moved with impressive coordination, their movements flowing together like a well-rehearsed dance. Their equipment was pristine, their tactics were textbook perfect, and their execution was nearly flawless. Bradley noticed her observation and approached. Lieutenant, the team is as ready as we can make them. What additional instructions do you have? None, Colonel. Your Marines look outstanding. I'm here to make sure you're comfortable with the coordination requirements and understand how your team fits into the bigger picture. Bradley gestured toward his Marines, who were beginning another rehearsal. We've studied the plan extensively. My only concern is the complexity of coordinating 4 different units with different procedures and communication protocols. Sarah understood his worry. Marines were trained to operate as tightly integrated units where everyone understood established procedures and could anticipate each other's actions. Adding unfamiliar units to the mix introduced variables that could complicate their normally smooth operations. Colonel, your Marines will be operating semi-independently for most of the mission, she explained. You'll receive general guidance and timeline updates from the command center, but you'll have tactical autonomy for your specific objectives. The coordination requirements are mainly about timing and communication, not about changing how your team operates. Bradley looked relieved. That makes more sense. We work best when we can use our established procedures and training. That's exactly why the plan is structured the way it is, Sarah confirmed. Each unit operates according to their strengths and training. The coordination happens at the command level, not at the individual team level. They spend time reviewing the communication protocols and emergency procedures. Bradley's questions were tactical and practical, focused on ensuring his Marines could complete their mission effectively while supporting the broader operation. The Air Force Special Operations Staging Area was the most technically complex, with sophisticated communication equipment, medical supplies, and precision shooting platforms. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez was coordinating with his team's technical specialists when Sarah arrived. Lieutenant Shun, we're ready for final coordination, Martinez said, gesturing toward his assembled team. My concern is maintaining effective communication with ground units while providing accurate overwatch and medical support. Sarah studied their communication setup, noting the multiple radio systems and data links they had established. Walk me through your communication procedures. Martinez explained how his team would maintain contact with each ground unit while coordinating with the central command post. The system was comprehensive but complex, with multiple backup communication methods and redundant information flows. The challenge, Martinez continued, is processing information from 4 different units with different communication styles and tactical vocabularies. My people are trained to work with Air Force units, primarily. Sarah nodded, understanding his concern. That's why we're using standardized terminology and simplified reporting procedures for this exercise. Each unit will provide updates using the same format and language, regardless of their normal communication protocols. She reviewed the simplified communication procedures they had developed specifically for the exercise. The system was designed to minimize confusion while ensuring that critical information reached all units quickly and accurately. Lieutenant Colonel, your team's role is critical to mission success, Sarah emphasized. The Overwatch positions you're establishing will provide security for all ground units. The medical support you're providing could save lives if something goes wrong. And the communication hub you're managing will keep everyone coordinated and informed. Martinez seemed more confident after reviewing the detailed procedures. My team is trained for this kind of support role. We just needed to understand how it would work with unfamiliar units. As Sarah completed her visits to each staging area, she noticed a subtle but significant change in the atmosphere. The initial skepticism and resistance have been replaced by professional curiosity and cautious optimism. The unit commanders had begun to understand that she had developed a thoughtful, realistic plan that utilized their strengths while accounting for the challenges of multi-unit coordination. More importantly, the individual operators had started to see her as a competent tactical commander rather than an unwelcome outsider. Her detailed knowledge of their capabilities and her obvious concern for their safety had begun to earn their grudging respect. Returning to the command center, Sarah found General Harrison and Major Williams reviewing the final exercise setup. Multiple screens displayed real-time feeds from the training facility, showing the simulated hostage situation and the defensive positions that the opposition forces had established. How did the units look? Harrison asked. Professional and ready, Sarah replied. There's still some skepticism, but they understand the plan and they're committed to executing it properly. Williams glanced at the tactical displays. Any last-minute changes to the plan? Sarah studied the screens for several minutes, noting the positions of the opposing forces and the layout of the building complex. The scenario was challenging but manageable, assuming her tactical assessment was accurate and no major surprises arose during the operation. No changes, she decided. The plan is solid, the units are ready, and we have good intelligence on the opposition. It's time to see if all the preparation pays off. Harrison checked his watch. 15 minutes until commencement. Are you ready for this? Sarah looked around the command center, noting the banks of communication equipment, tactical displays, and monitoring systems that would allow her to coordinate the operation in real time. Everything was in place for what would either validate her unconventional approach or demonstrate the limitations of placing unknown operators in command positions. I'm ready, General. The next few hours would determine whether 8 years of classified operations and careful preparation had adequately prepared her for one of the most challenging tests of her military career. The skeptical commanders were about to discover whether their doubts were justified or whether they had underestimated the quiet logistics officer who claimed to be something much more dangerous. In 15 minutes, Sarah Chan would either establish herself as a legitimate special operations commander or face a very public failure that would end any possibility of future leadership roles. The exercise was about to begin, and there would be no opportunity to explain away poor performance or blame external factors for failure. She took a deep breath, reviewed her tactical plan one final time, and prepared to prove that competence could come from unexpected sources. The real test was about to begin. At exactly 1,000 hours, Sarah keyed her radio and spoke the words that would begin Operation Thunderstrike. All units, this is command. Exercise is now live. Execute phase 1 on my mark. Mark. The command center immediately came alive with activity as communication specialists began monitoring 4 different radio networks and tracking the movement of each unit through GPS displays. Sarah positioned herself at the central coordination station, where she could observe all tactical feeds and maintain contact with every team simultaneously. SEAL Team, Report status, she called in her headset. Commander Peterson's voice came back clear and professional. Command, SEAL Team is beginning water approach. No visual contact with opposition forces. Estimated time to dock area is 7 minutes. Copy, SEAL Team. Maintain calm schedule and report any changes in opposition activity. The Rangers had already begun their movement to establish perimeter positions. Major Thompson's voice crackled through the radio. Command, Ranger units are deploying to overwatch positions. First Squad reports multiple civilian bystanders in the target area. Request guidance on crowd control procedures. Sarah studied the tactical display showing the positions of simulated civilians around the building complex. This complication hadn't been part of the original briefing, but it was exactly the kind of real-world variable that made exercises valuable training opportunities. Ranger units establish soft perimeter at 200 meters from primary structure. Use verbal warnings to move civilians away from potential danger zones. Do not use force unless absolutely necessary to prevent civilian casualties. Roger, Command. Establishing soft perimeter with crowd control measures. The Marine Force Recon Team was moving through their approach route with characteristic precision. Colonel Bradley's updates were brief and professional. Command, Marine unit approaching east entrance. No contact with opposition forces. Ready to begin surveillance phase. Copy, Marines. Maintain position and observe. Report all opposition activity and defensive preparations. The Air Force team was establishing their overwatch and communication positions in a building overlooking the target area. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez coordinated the complex setup while maintaining communication with all ground units. Command, Air Force Overwatch is established. We have visual on the entire target area and communication links with all units. Ready to provide support. Sarah felt the familiar rhythm of tactical command settling over her. This was the environment where she felt most comfortable and competent, coordinating multiple moving parts in a complex situation where split-second decisions could determine success or failure. All units, Command. Phase 1 complete. Begin Phase 2 surveillance and intelligence gathering. Report all opposition activity and defensive measures. For the next 20 minutes, each unit methodically gathered information about the simulated enemy forces and the hostage situation. The opposition force, played by experienced military instructors, had established a realistic defensive setup with multiple escape routes and hidden weapon positions. The SEAL team reported first significant contact. Command, SEAL team has reached dock area. Opposition has established observation post on second floor overlooking water approach. Estimate 2 personnel with automatic weapons. Sarah marked the position on her tactical display. Copy, SEAL team. Can you neutralize the observation post without compromising overall mission security? Affirmative, Command. We can take the position with suppressed weapons. No risk of alerting other opposition forces. Execute when ready and report completion. The Rangers were providing detailed intelligence on civilian locations and opposition perimeter defenses. Command, Ranger Overwatch reports multiple opposition positions on building perimeter. Estimate 8 to 10 personnel with defensive positions covering all major approach routes. This information was critical for planning the final assault phase. Sarah updated her tactical display with the new intelligence, noting how the opposition positions would affect each unit's approach. Rangers maintain surveillance and update any changes in opposition positions. Prepare for crowd control during assault phase. The Marines had completed their reconnaissance of the east entrance and were reporting detailed information about the building's defensive preparations. Command, Marine unit reports east entrance is heavily fortified. Multiple barriers, possible explosive devices, and covered firing positions. Recommend alternative approach route. Sarah studied the building schematics, comparing the Marine reconnaissance with the intelligence from other units. The opposition had clearly concentrated their defenses on the most obvious approach routes, which suggested they might have left other areas more lightly defended. Marines Can you identify any weaknesses in the defensive setup? Alternative entry points that might be less heavily defended. Colonel Bradley's response came after several minutes of careful observation. Command, there's a service entrance on the northeast corner that appears to have minimal coverage. Single guard position with limited fields of fire. Sarah marked the location on her display. This was the kind of tactical flexibility that separated good operations from failed ones. The ability to adapt the plan based on actual conditions rather than initial assumptions. Marines, prepare to redirect to northeast service entrance. Wait for coordination with other units before beginning approach. The Air Force Overwatch team was providing the most comprehensive picture of the overall tactical situation. Command, Air Force report hostages are located on the 3rd floor, northwest section of building. Visual confirmation of at least 6 hostages with multiple guards. Opposition appears to be preparing for possible evacuation. This was crucial intelligence that would affect the timing and approach for the final assault. If the opposition was planning to move the hostages, the tactical window for rescue could close quickly. All units, command. Priority intelligence update. Hostages are located 3rd floor, northwest section. Opposition may be planning evacuation. We need to accelerate timeline for final assault phase. Sarah quickly recalculated her tactical plan based on the new intelligence and changing situation. The original timeline had assumed they would have more time for surveillance and preparation, but the possibility of hostage evacuation required faster action. SEAL Team, report status on dock area security. Command, SEAL Team has neutralized observation post and secure dock area. No opposition activity detected. Ready to provide backup support or prevent waterborne evacuation. Rangers report status on perimeter control and civilian safety. Command, Rangers have established secure perimeter. Civilian bystanders have been moved to safe distance. Ready to prevent ground evacuation and provide fire support. Marines, report readiness for northeast entrance assault. Command, Marines are in position at northeast service entrance. Opposition guard has been identified and targeted. Ready to breach on your command. Air Force, report Overwatch status and communication readiness. Command, Air Force Overwatch has complete visual coverage of target building. All communication links are functioning. Medical team is standing by for casualty treatment. Sarah reviewed all the information on her tactical display. Each unit was in position, the opposition layout was understood, and the hostage location was confirmed. The situation was as ready as it would ever be for the final assault phase. All units, this is command. Prepare for Phase 3 final assault. Marines will breach northeast entrance and secure access route. Rangers will provide overwatch and prevent evacuation. SEALs will maintain water security and prepare for backup assault if needed. Air Force will coordinate communication and provide medical support. She paused, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the success or failure of the entire operation. Marines, you are authorized to begin breach sequence in 60 seconds. All units acknowledge. The acknowledgements came back quickly and professionally from each unit commander. Sarah could hear the tension and focus in their voices as they prepared for the most dangerous phase of the operation. Marines, begin breach sequence now. Colonel Bradley's voice was calm and controlled. Command, Marines beginning breach sequence. Opposition guard neutralized. Moving to building entry. The tactical displays showed the Marines' position markers moving steadily toward the building. Sarah watched their progress while monitoring reports from the other units who were providing security and overwatch. Command, Marines have entered building. No immediate opposition encountered. Moving to stairwell access. Rangers report no opposition movement on perimeter. All evacuation routes remain secure. SEALs report no waterborne activity. Dock area remains under friendly control. Air Force reports good visibility on 3rd floor target area. No signs of hostage movement at this time. Sarah felt the familiar heightened awareness that came during the critical phase of any operation. Every decision mattered. Every second counted, and there was no room for hesitation or uncertainty. Marines, report status on stairwell access and route to third floor. Command, Marines have reached stairwell. Encountered light opposition on second floor. 2 opposition personnel neutralized. Continuing to third floor. Copy, Marines. Air Force, any changes in third floor activity? Command, Air Force reports increased opposition movement on third floor. Estimate 4 to 6 personnel moving toward hostage location. Possible preparation for evacuation or defensive consolidation. The situation was developing exactly as Sarah had anticipated. The opposition was reacting to the breach by consolidating their forces around the hostages, which created both opportunities and risks for the rescue operation. Marines, opposition is consolidating around hostage location on third floor. Be prepared for heavy resistance when you reach target area. Roger, Command. Marines are prepared for opposition contact. All units, stand by for possible timeline acceleration. Opposition appears to be preparing defensive positions around hostages. Sarah watched the tactical displays as the Marines continued their advance through the building. The operation was proceeding according to plan, but the opposition's reaction was forcing faster movement than originally anticipated. Command, Marines have reached third floor. Heavy opposition encountered. Estimate 6 personnel with automatic weapons in defensive positions around hostage area. This was the critical moment. The Marines had reached their objective, but faced significant opposition that could complicate the hostage rescue. Sarah had to decide whether to continue with the current plan or call in additional support from other units. Marines, can you handle opposition force with current personnel? Or do you need backup support? Bradley's response came after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. Command, Marines can handle current opposition. Request immediate coordination with Air Force for precision fire support on opposition positions. Air Force, can you provide precise fire support for Marine operation without risk to hostages? Command, Air Force has clear shots on 2 opposition positions. Can provide suppressive fire to support Marine advance. Execute coordinated assault. Marines advance with Air Force fire support. All other units maintain security positions. The next few minutes were intense as Sarah coordinated the complex final phase of the rescue operation. The Marines advanced under covering fire from the Air Force positions while maintaining communication about hostage locations and opposition activity. Command, Marines have secured hostage area. 6 hostages recovered safely. All opposition personnel neutralized or captured. The relief in the command center was palpable. Sarah felt the tension leave her shoulders as the successful completion of the mission was confirmed. All units, Command. Mission accomplished. Hostages secured. Opposition neutralized. No friendly casualties. Begin extraction procedures according to plan. As the various units began their organized withdrawal from the exercise area, Sarah realized she had successfully commanded her first Joint Special Operations mission. More importantly, she had done it without losing the respect or confidence of the unit commanders who had initially doubted her qualifications. The real test, however, would come in the debriefing session where those same commanders would evaluate her performance and decide whether she deserved their continued respect or whether the successful mission had been more luck than skill. The debriefing room was unusually quiet as the unit commanders filed in for the post-exercise analysis. Sarah had arrived early, reviewing her notes and preparing for what she knew would be a detailed examination of every decision made during Operation Thunderstrike. The successful mission outcome would not shield her from criticism if her tactical choices had been flawed or if she had been simply lucky rather than competent. General Harrison entered with his usual commanding presence, followed by Major Williams and several other senior officers who had observed the exercise. The atmosphere was professional but expectant, as everyone understood that this debriefing would determine whether the unconventional command structure had been a success or a dangerous experiment that should not be repeated. Ladies and gentlemen, Harrison began, Let's conduct a comprehensive review of Operation Thunderstrike. I want honest assessments of what worked, what didn't work, and what lessons we can draw from this exercise. He turned to Sarah. Lieutenant Shun, please provide your overall assessment of the mission. Sarah stood and moved to the tactical display that showed the complete operation timeline. General, the mission was successful by all measurable standards. All hostages were recovered safely, opposition forces were neutralized, and we achieved our objectives without friendly casualties. Mission time was 4 hours and 17 minutes, which was within acceptable parameters. She pointed to different phases of the operation on the display. The success factors included effective intelligence gathering, flexible tactical adaptation, and excellent coordination between units with different training backgrounds and operational procedures. Commander Peterson raised his hand. Lieutenant, I'll be honest. My team was skeptical about this command structure going into the exercise. But your tactical planning was solid, and you demonstrated real understanding of our capabilities and limitations. Major Thompson nodded in agreement. The plan allowed each unit to operate according to our strengths while maintaining overall mission coherence. That's not easy to accomplish with 4 different special operations units. Colonel Bradley leaned forward in his chair. What impressed my Marines was how quickly you adapted the plan when we discovered the opposition had concentrated their defenses differently than expected. The decision to redirect to the northeast entrance probably saved lives and definitely shortened the mission timeline. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez added his perspective. The communication protocols worked better than I expected. Usually when you try to coordinate multiple units, the information flow becomes confusing and contradictory. Your simplified reporting procedures eliminated most of that confusion. Sarah felt a sense of relief, but she knew the real evaluation would come when they examined the specific tactical decisions she had made under pressure. Success was important, but the methods used to achieve that success would determine whether she had truly earned their respect. General Harrison gestured toward the detailed mission timeline. Let's examine some of the critical decision points. Lieutenant Shun, walk us through your thinking when you decided to accelerate the timeline after learning the opposition might evacuate the hostages. Sarah moved to the timeline display, pointing to the specific moment when the Air Force Overwatch had reported increased activity around the hostage location. General, the original plan assumed we would have more time for reconnaissance and preparation. When it became apparent that delay might result in hostage movement, I had to weigh the risks of proceeding with incomplete intelligence against the risks of losing the tactical opportunity. She traced the modified timeline on the display. Each unit had reported readiness for their assigned phase. The intelligence picture was sufficient to execute the mission safely. The risk of waiting appeared to outweigh the risk of proceeding. Commander Peterson spoke up. That decision felt right from our perspective. We were ready to execute, and waiting would have given the opposition time to improve their defensive positions. Harrison nodded approvingly. Good tactical instinct. What about the decision to provide Air Force fire support during the final assault? That wasn't part of the original plan. Sarah had been expecting this question. The decision to modify the plan in real time had been necessary, but carried significant risk. General, when the Marines encountered heavier opposition than expected, I had to choose between sending additional ground forces or utilizing the precision fire support that was already in position. Colonel Bradley interrupted. Lieutenant, that fire support made the difference between a quick resolution and a prolonged firefight that could have endangered the hostages. The Air Force positions provided precise angles that minimized risk to hostages while maximizing effectiveness against opposition forces, Sarah continued. It was the most efficient use of available resources for the tactical situation we faced. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez confirmed the assessment. Our positions were ideal for supporting the Marine assault. The coordination worked exactly as it should have. Major Williams, who had been quietly taking notes throughout the debriefing, looked up from his tablet. Lieutenant Shun, what would you have done differently if you could repeat the mission? Sarah considered the question carefully. Every military operation could be improved in retrospect, and honest self-assessment was critical for future success. I would have positioned backup communication systems earlier in the operation. We came close to losing contact with a Marine unit during their building assault, and that could have been catastrophic if the situation had developed differently. She pointed to another section of the timeline. I also would have established clearer protocols for civilian evacuation. The Rangers handled the situation well, but we could have been more proactive about moving bystanders to safety before beginning the operation. Harrison made notes on his tablet. Those are reasonable self-assessments. What about the overall command structure? Do you think this type of unconventional leadership arrangement could work in real-world operations? Sarah glanced around the room at the unit commanders who had initially been skeptical of her authority. Their expressions had changed significantly from the morning briefing, showing professional respect rather than skeptical resistance. General, I think it depends on the specific situation and the personalities involved, she replied carefully. This exercise succeeded because we had professional, experienced commanders who were willing to adapt to an unusual situation. The key factors were clear communication, mutual respect, and focus on mission accomplishment rather than personal ego. Commander Peterson leaned back in his chair. I have to admit, Lieutenant, you've changed my perspective on leadership qualifications. Your background and approach brought capabilities that our units might not have had with conventional command structure. Major Thompson agreed. The cross-training experience you mentioned earlier showed up in how you understood each unit's capabilities. You knew what we could realistically accomplish and what would push us beyond effective limits. Colonel Bradley added, more importantly, you listened to our input and incorporated our expertise into the tactical planning. Too many commanders think leadership means having all the answers yourself. General Harrison smiled, clearly pleased with the direction of the discussion. Gentlemen, what you're describing is exactly what modern military leadership should look like. The ability to coordinate diverse capabilities, adapt to changing situations, and make sound tactical decisions under pressure. He turned back to Sarah. Lieutenant Shun, based on this exercise and the feedback from these commanders, I'm recommending you for assignment to the Joint Special Operations Command Training Cadre. Your experience and demonstrated competence would be valuable for developing future special operations leaders. The offer was simultaneously exciting and concerning. Assignment to JSOC would mean the end of her carefully maintained anonymity and the beginning of a much more visible military career. It would also mean leaving behind the independent operations that had defined her professional life for the past 8 years. General, I'm honored by the recommendation, Sarah replied carefully. Can I ask about the specific nature of the assignment? Harrison exchanged glances with Major Williams before responding. You would be developing training programs for unconventional leadership scenarios and cross-unit coordination. Your background gives you unique insights into how different military specialties can work together effectively. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez spoke up. Lieutenant, if you're assigned to JSOC training, would you be available to work with Air Force Special Operations units? We could benefit from your approach to multi-unit coordination. Commander Peterson nodded. The SEAL community would be interested in training opportunities that focus on working with unfamiliar command structures. Today's exercise showed us we have room for improvement in that area. Sarah realized that the successful exercise had accomplished more than just proving her tactical competence. It had demonstrated the value of flexible leadership approaches and cross-training between different special operations communities. General, I accept the assignment recommendation, she decided. But I'd like to request that any training programs include real-world operational scenarios rather than purely academic exercises. Harrison grinned. Lieutenant, after today's performance, I wouldn't expect anything less from you. The training programs will definitely include realistic operational challenges. As the formal debriefing concluded, Sarah found herself surrounded by the same commanders who had initially questioned her qualifications. Their attitudes had completely transformed, and they were now asking detailed questions about her training background and operational experience. Commander Peterson approached her as the group began to disperse. Lieutenant, I have to ask about something you mentioned this morning. The 1,847-meter sniper shot with 30 seconds to acquire and engage. What was the target? Sarah glanced toward General Harrison, who nodded slightly. It was a terrorist leader who was about to execute 3 humanitarian workers in Afghanistan. The shot had to be taken from a concealed position with limited visibility and variable wind conditions. Peterson whistled softly. That's extraordinary marksmanship under extreme pressure. Major Thompson overheard the conversation and moved closer. How many operations like that have you actually conducted? Enough to know that successful missions depend more on planning and teamwork than individual heroics, Sarah replied diplomatically. Today's exercise was a perfect example. No single person could have accomplished what we achieved through coordinated effort. Colonel Bradley smiled. Spoken like a true special operations professional. You've definitely earned our respect, Lieutenant. As the commanders filed out of the debriefing room, Sarah remained behind with General Harrison and Major Williams. The successful exercise had exceeded everyone's expectations, but she understood that it also marked the end of one phase of her military career and the beginning of something entirely different. Sarah, Harrison said, using her first name for the first time, you've proven that competence can come from unexpected sources and that effective leadership is more about capability than credentials. That's a valuable lesson for the entire special operations community. Major Williams closed his notebook. The Pentagon is going to be very interested in the results of this exercise. It could influence how we approach leadership selection and training across all special operations units. Sarah nodded, understanding the broader implications. General, I'm ready for whatever assignment follows, but I want to make sure the lessons from today aren't lost. The success wasn't about me personally. It was about creating an environment where experienced professionals could work together effectively despite unfamiliar command structures. Harrison stood up, signaling the end of their private discussion. That's exactly the right attitude, Lieutenant. And that's exactly why you're going to be an outstanding addition to the JSOC training cadre. As they left the debriefing room, Sarah reflected on the remarkable transformation that had occurred over the past 24 hours. Yesterday, she had been an anonymous logistics officer with a carefully hidden background. Today, she was a recognized special operations leader with a high-profile assignment and the respect of some of the military's most elite commanders. The quiet anonymity that had defined her career for 8 years was definitely over. But in its place, she had gained something potentially more valuable, the opportunity to influence how the next generation of special operations leaders would be trained and developed. Walking across the base toward her quarters, Sarah realized that Admiral Harrison had been right about one thing from the very beginning. Sometimes the person best qualified to lead an operation wasn't the person anyone expected. And sometimes proving that point required nothing more than the opportunity to demonstrate competence under pressure. The exercise had been successful by every measurable standard. More importantly, it had proven that military excellence could come from unexpected sources and that true leadership was defined by results rather than appearances. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities, but Sarah Chun was no longer the unknown quantity she had been that morning. She was now a proven special operations commander with a reputation that would precede her wherever her career led next.